Hello there, everyone. We're so glad you're back for another episode of Finding Peace with Carol Howe. I think everyone will agree we seem to be more in need of an unshakable peace than ever before, as so many people feel bewildered and not sure if there's a stable base under their feet. Happily, stability comes from within and not looking for it outside ourselves. Our inner stability is a gift we offer to others as our peace of mind becomes a primary goal. As we all know, when something is important to us, we will always find the means to make it happen. So I sure do hope your peace of mind falls into that really important category. Today, since it's February, the month of Valentine's Day, how could we not focus on relationships and making them more peaceful? We have so deeply misunderstood the purpose of our relationships, which is our mutual healing. Yes, we were all unfortunately taught that they were about getting our way, staying in our comfort zone, and having someone else confer the specialness and the value we feared we did not intrinsically have. So now, it's essential that we explore our relationships to see that they actually are the fast track for our healing. They reveal to us exactly what we believe about ourselves and subsequently how we treat ourselves, which is often not very well. Now, today, our two guests are able to articulate their fear at moving in together, which happens tomorrow, because they are so perfectly able to push one another's buttons. She writes that she was raised in a peace-at-any-price family, and he, from earliest times, felt unworthy and just generally not okay. Well, it's pretty evident that pain is going to surface, but it will not be caused but triggered by the other person. Our job will be for them to see that the relationship is actually for discovering, for owning, and for healing that pain. Not welcome at first, but finally recognized as a lifesaver, because only when these things are owned and healed can we really be happy and at peace. So now, we'll see what's actually going on. Enjoy!
Are you there?
We're here.
Wonderful. It's just lovely to talk to you again. And I need to just say for our listening people that we've all had one other talk before, and we're just pretty much going to take up where we left off. So, since that was a few weeks ago, you tell me, what's happening? What's up at the top of your list?
Let's see. Top of the list is that false sense of relief that now that we're not living together, our problems are solved. That's called the geographical cure, where you think if you just get away from the stimulus, that the problem has gone away. And what a brilliant thing to say, because that's what everybody runs to, all of their addictions and all of the things that can distract them. That's why we run to those, because we do not want to be in the presence of an actually useful stimulus, because we don't want to go there. What do you think?
That sounds, I think Eileen hit it right on the head, because it has seemed like a really big relief, not living in the same place again, although we will be living together starting tomorrow for about a week, because I have my house at the beach rented where I have been living.
Okay.
So I'm sure we'll get to experience some new, well, at least a new perspective on some problems that we've had in the past living together, and hopefully see them through a different pair of glasses.
Well, it seems to me like then that our timing is exquisite. Since I didn't know that, it's like it's just interesting that it's worked out the way it has.
I think you're right. The timing is perfect. We thought the same thing. We were talking about it yesterday, that there's a couple of weeks that my place is rented here where I am living now, have been living, and I'm going to honor those rentals for now, anyway, and probably end up living back here for now anyway, while we regroup and decide on what direction we want to go. There's still a part of me, and I think I speak for Eileen also, that believes that we might just need a bigger house, and maybe that would solve some of the problems we had living at Eileen's house now, because it seemed small, and we just didn't each have our space that I think we need.
Well, that might be a little piece of it, but the more important piece is, let's take a look at what it is that you all seem to trigger in one another, because this is the key to our own healing. In other words, Bill, in just, kind of the 25 words or less version, what is it that is so distressing that it brings up some kind of upset for you in terms of Eileen's behavior?
Well, I'll tell you, the feelings that come up are I get angry. I get, I feel I get scared and feel trapped with, I guess, Eileen's behavior, almost like I'm being treated unfairly.
Okay, so in the first place, anger always comes up for any of us human beings when we feel powerless, when there's the sense that something needs to be different for me to be safe or to be okay, and I cannot make it be different the way I want to. And so therefore there's that feeling of impotence. It's not like, well, this is a challenge, but I know how to handle it. This is, I've got to have things be a certain way, and I cannot make that happen. That's where anger comes from. And so you think, let's just take a look at what is it that she's not doing, or doing, as the case may be, that is so basically infuriating?
Well, specifically, would you like to do some things?
Pick your favorite one.
Well, I could get...
Are we staying to 25 words or less?
Yeah. Well, if there's a lot, then we only want to spend 25 words on each one.
Well, let's see. I'll give a generalization. I feel like since it's Eileen's house where she has lived for a number of years, that she still runs it like she's in charge, and her say goes in whatever we do, right down to the smallest things, like what I'm allowed to keep on the kitchen counter that I like, which specifically might be my favorite teapot that it sounds funny talking about it now, but that she wouldn't let me keep there because she said it made too much clutter on the counter. And it was something that I really enjoyed, and that's something that I bought because it's a very nice item. And that little stuff like that just really angered me. I felt like I was being treated like a child and a parent telling me what I can and cannot do as an adult man.
Well, you've made a very interesting point, which often it can be a very small thing that sets off a very large upset. You've probably heard other people say something disturbs them terribly, and you might think, what? Well, that's kind of a little nothing. So it's just so individual for all of us. So never think that a small thing is a small thing. In other words, it might seem to others who don't have an issue about this that this is kind of a big nothing. But what it brings up that you have already indicated is very important. That feeling of being dismissed or diminished or not listened to, or your feelings aren't considered to be important, or your input's not important, or maybe just you're not important. In other words, those might be words that surround a feeling of distress that comes up. Do those seem to apply?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
then here's the important thing to hear. That Eileen is serving you, because what she's doing is acting as a catalyst or a trigger, whatever word works for you best, to get you in touch with something that you are doing to you. And you think, well, I just hate hearing about that. I certainly do want this to be about somebody else and not about me. But one of the things I hear myself saying all the time is other people appear to treat us. Now, that's an important word, appear, because from your perspective, she appears to be treating you in a dismissive way that may or may not have a thing to do with what her own motivation is or what's going on with her, but that's the way it's being interpreted on your side. In other words, it's very often the case what one person says and what another person hears sometimes bear no relevance to one another whatsoever. But in this case, there's something about the behavior that is getting you in touch with that feeling of being small and dismissed and unimportant.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. I mean, since we've talked and trying to process this through the spiritual path that I'm on via Course in Miracles and being with it for a while, I have, to the best of my ability, I've come to see that it's really brought up real feelings of inadequacy I have about myself.
Absolutely.
Unworthiness that I have about myself, and so I'm starting to see it as a blessing, like you said, that where I can stop blaming her for making me feel a certain way, and to see, well, what is this really touching in me? And although it wasn't pleasant to admit at first, it surely felt liberating and to be on the path to some true healing when I really got to look at it from a different perspective.
Well, that's marvelous, because there's for sure no healing can take place until some recognition is allowed. And when you see, what we normally do is we decide that someone else's job, in this case Eileen's, is to keep you in your comfort zone. In other words, if she would just behave a certain way, the way I have in mind, then I would not have to get in touch with my upset feelings and everything would be okay. Well, actually, it wouldn't be okay at all, because just because you're living inside a tiny little comfort zone does not make you happy and does not allow you to be peaceful and does not allow you to grow into the brilliant presence you are. So the people who push us out of our comfort zones are doing us a big favor. And do we like that? Absolutely not. It takes a while after some healing has occurred to begin to say, thank you, God. This is exactly what needed to happen. But nobody does that in the first 25 minutes.
Right.
Do that. But can you see that? Can you see that I want her to let me do what I want to do because this is my way to stay safe? I don't feel safe under a lot of circumstances, and somehow with this I feel safe. Why doesn't matter. All that it matters is that the dynamic between you is making you aware of some old programming that only you can change. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful, and I believe that. What I am discovering as I go along is that I understand that, and I believe that in theory. I mean, not even so much just theory, but in truth, I believe that. And however, it's easy for me to forget that sometimes when something seemingly upsetting, the first thing I want to do is say I'm upset because of something outside of me.
Right.
Something Eileen's doing. And when you mentioned earlier that, we kind of look at it as Eileen's job to keep me in my comfort zone, I certainly hope that isn't true, because she's failed miserably if that was her job.
Well, that's what you wanted her job to be. What the universe's job wanted her to be is exactly the way she's being. In other words, because if she always did what you wanted her to do, then you would stay in a lot of pain and you would be oblivious to it. And you see, now the great distinction that must be made is this sense of unworthiness, or this sense of not being important, or this sense that nobody cares about you. A number of things to be said. First of all, every single human being on the planet carries some variation on this theme. This is not peculiar to just a handful of people. The second thing is, this never, ever addresses any truth about us whatsoever. This is a result of brain development, many people's lack of understanding of child psychology, and our DNA, a whole bunch of stuff, so that when we're very little, because we don't have a full deck of cards that we're playing with in terms of neuroscience is concerned, we necessarily misconnect the dots and decide instinctively, not because we have an intellect to use at that time, because some of this happens when we're just barely born, that we automatically go toward what feels better and recoil from what feels painful. And that's at physical and, you might say, psychological level. So all of this misconnection of the dots ends up such that every human being, by the time he or she is 6 or 7 years old, has got this feeling of not being okay. And it can be extreme, like I'm a hideous, horrible person and I should be locked up, or, I'm just sort of, I don't know what's the matter with me, but, I think there's something the matter and I just don't want anybody to know about it. In other words, it can be very vague, but the problem is, while we're misunderstanding and growing this little separate self-ego thing that's got all this sense of unworthiness built into it, we are also developing defenses against feeling these wounds, these emotional wounds. So we develop physical defenses, like literally our breathing becomes shallow and muscles become tight starting when we're very, very young. And that's a big topic, but I'll just touch on it like that. We then develop emotional defenses. We develop intellectual defenses, so that by the time we get to be young adults in our 20s and the brain is finally developed at age 23 or 4, the whole neocortex, we are a young adult, and we are a big pile of false beliefs about ourselves that cause a lot of pain, and then a whole bunch of defenses piled on top of that so that I don't have to feel it or know it's there or deal with it. So we all start our young adulthood in a very compromised manner. Does that make sense to both of you?
That makes perfect sense to me. I'm sitting here kind of with my mouth open, feeling like somebody just explained the mystery of life to me.
Well, that is kind of the mystery of life. And you see, here's the thing. As long as I walk around in my defenses, and all of us will have our own little unique cache of defenses, so to speak, depending upon the kind of wounding that we're involved with when we're little. Some is more extreme than others. And we don't know that those are defenses. We just think this is how life is. And most tragic of all, we think that these are feelings and thoughts and so on that represent the truth of us. And you know what?
if they did, if this represented the truth of us, we would just say, yep, stick with your addictions and distractions. This is too painful to deal with. End of story. But the tragedy is it's not the truth of us. It's just this mythology about us. And so we go through our lives feeling hurt, defending against the hurt, defending against one another, being mad when people could possibly get behind our defenses and into our woundedness, and never realizing, oh, let's stop this. This is not about us. This is just baby stuff we learn. It is quite literally true, and this is not an insulting statement, it's an accurate statement, that we are literally operating out of infantile programming. Well, no wonder you look at the world and think, so here we are, a whole batch of human beings mostly living out of our infantile programming. And so it's a huge amount of defensiveness, a huge amount of violence, a huge amount of self-violence, in that we're so hard on one another and we blame ourselves and each other and so on. So what Eileen is doing, and this is a little diagram that I want you to see, if I say it to you, you can envision. And both of you do this. So imagine that kind of up somewhere, like draw this on a piece of paper in your imagination. Okay, there you've got some little round circle, and that represents your conscious mind. And then underneath it is a much larger circle, or some kind of a diagram that represents your unconscious mind that's got all this garbage in it. And you can't go directly from your conscious mind down into this unconscious mind, because the reason a lot of this is unconscious is because you do not want to deal with it. So then it's kind of like, this is going to be the cartoon version of this. So kind of like the universe says, oh my God, I've got to wake them up somehow. How are we going to do this? And so relationships come to the rescue. So out here to the side, so that it's kind of, it could form a triangle, so to speak, between your conscious mind up here, then your unconscious below it, and over here to the side at a 45-degree angle from both of those little diagrams is somebody. In this case, it's going to be Eileen. And although you can't go directly into your unconscious, you can be aware of Eileen. Okay? Just like, yes, okay, I got that so far. Yeah. And what she is doing is behaving in such a way that she's mirroring something that's in your unconscious that you can't get to directly. So she becomes this agent out here that you can be conscious of her. She is picking up what's going on in your unconsciousness and revealing it to you. So she is not the cause of your difficulty, but she is revealing to you what in the world is that attack, that self-attack going on in your unconscious mind. Can you envision that little diagram as I described it to you?
Yes, absolutely. I find it fascinating.
And so there you think, oh my gosh, she is reflecting to me, because she's acting like a mirror in this case. She's reflecting to you what you believe about yourself, how you are attacking yourself, because you can't access that information directly. So she's really giving you a great gift. Now, are we appreciative of the gift? Not ever in the beginning. It takes some while, and it can't be appreciated until we are grown up enough to say, okay, the way I feel, and we're now talking about the hurt emotional stuff that you're experiencing, I can't grow up until I own that it's my thoughts that are creating my emotional state and my pain. It's not her. She's just sitting over here in effect saying, Bill, this is what you're doing to yourself. She doesn't say those words, but that's actually the role she's playing. She's just showing you.
I think she might have said that once or twice.
Yeah. Well, and until we get it, that whatever it is, the wounding that comes up, then we have to know, what do I do with the wounding? It doesn't do any good to just say, stop doing what you're doing. All this is your fault. It's like I can only go, oh, I'm having to notice that I am the one that's wounded. I have to also know that my emotional state is caused by, get this, my thoughts. So your emotional state of upset is kind of, if you reverse engineer it, you find, you know what? You're the one who put yourself down. And you're the one who have said, I'm not okay, or I'm not worthy, or I'm unimportant and I don't have to be paid attention to. That's a very bitter pill to have to swallow, and yet that's the way you get to be free, because in the biggest voice that we can come up with is to surround what I just said with this very sweet, generous declaration that this is not about you. It's only about your little ego mind separate self that you've invented. You, who you really are, is not part of this. It's already perfect. It's at peace. It's nothing but love itself. It's not involved here. We're involved only with the ego mind, which is acting as such a block to our peace. Is that understandable?
Yes, absolutely. I as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, I just never realized the amount of woundedness that I did carry within me.
Bless your heart.
I thought I did become aware of a lot of it in the past, but it seems like the more I do, the more there is. There's more, you know, and I agree with what you're saying 100%. I just it floors me that it seems redundant, but it floors me how unconscious we are of that we have an unconscious mind.
Yeah,
so much is going on out of our awareness.
It is. It's kind of like all that stuff we believe down there is driving the bus. And we go, why is this bus going this direction? It's like, because, well, I'm actually directing where it's going. So we sure need to find out what that is. So now I want to have a little chat with Eileen, who's, I guess you're still there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so can you see in reverse how this works for you?
Oh, absolutely. And it's still in the very uncomfortable phase.
Yes, and here's what I don't want you to do, because we all are habituated to being afraid of our emotional states. And it's like we've been taught it's a terrible thing and it's not okay to be upset. And we're so poorly educated about that. If we could see this as, oh, when I become upset, there is a big healing opportunity right here. So we have to completely reframe the way we approach our upset. In other words, because this is never about you, it's the upset that's related to your fear, the whole sense of ego, separate self. And the pain and the wounding needs to be healed. Now, here's the reason why. You might say, why can't I just hide my wounding and not have to deal with it? Well, the problem is that with the wounding comes the defensiveness. In other words, we close down, we shut down, we hold back. Can you be aware of doing that sometimes?
Oh, absolutely.
And so here's the problem with that. I can't shut down and hold back selectively. I can't say I'm going to shut down and hold back against pain, and I will be completely open and receptive to love and abundance and peace and prosperity and all the good stuff of life. Unfortunately, when I shut down to try to avoid pain, I shut down to avoid everything. You'd say, well, what a crummy deal is that? I wish I could selectively shut down. But that's not the way defenses work. It's like we walk along in life dragging our armor kind of around us. Can you imagine if you could just see everybody as you go shopping someplace and everybody's wearing an old medieval suit of armor, and it's very clunky, and if you just can't express and you trip and fall with it, I mean, the defenses become liabilities in themselves. And it's not like we take the armor off and on and off and on for this, off for that. For the most part, once we are armored, because so much of it is unconscious, we're armored. Well, here's the tragedy. When I'm trying to block feeling an experience that I don't want to feel, I'm also blocking my ability to give and receive love. I'm blocking my ability to be at peace. I'm blocking my good intuition. I'm blocking all the good that can be part of my life. And you think, well, that's a pretty big price to pay. Like, I think I might be better off to see what it would be like to be undefended, feel the woundedness, in which case it will heal. Then, as kind of step 2, always the woundedness and the upset we need to be open-hearted to, which is not the way we normally respond to it. We normally try to run the other direction, pretend like it's there, deny it, and so on and so forth. But if instead we'll go, I'm going to take a deep breath, and this is just how I feel right now. This isn't a statement of who I am or what it's going to be in 10 hours or something like that. This is just like the weather passing through right now. So, okay, the weather can pass through. In other words, it's just having a much easier and more open response to it. And this has to be practiced because it's unnatural to us at this point because of everything we've learned. Have you tried that? What is your normal response to your upset?
Well, of course, it depends on who the upset is coming from. Because the last time that we talked, I was sharing a lot about my the people pleasing part of me that tries to manipulate myself. And so I'm really trying hard to look at this, relationship and situation with Bill as he's getting ready to move back to my house for a week. I recognize that I'm really scared of I grew up with keep the peace at all costs.
I understand that. I did too. It's an awful way to grow up.
Right. And I can see that, my relationship with Bill is to teach me that does not serve me. And the frustrating part of I don't know what to do is forcing me to try and remember that I don't have the answer for this. I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, I was going to say, I can't think that there's anything that you have to know or do about this ahead of time. In other words, he hasn't moved back in yet. You're not at that point, but I can see that you're jumping ahead, like, what if he does something that I don't like, and I don't really have the right to my own voice? I don't really have the right to say, you know what, this really brings up something for me, or I don't want to walk around the block right now, or whatever it is. In other words, it brings you face to face with the way you have taught yourself to sell out. And just as, for instance, you push him into his discomfort, his merely moving back in, even if he doesn't do anything but just walk in the door, pushes you into your discomfort of, what if something happens that I don't want to happen and I don't have the right to say, I don't want to do that? Do you think that's what's going on?
Oh, exactly.
And so,
exactly.
So what if you decide, you know what, I will not be punished, and I will not be ostracized, and I will not die if I say my truth. Because you see, those of us who were raised this way, this is hardwired in at a very early age at a survival level. Like, if the transgression occurs, and this doesn't mean that we're all beaten or something awful, but sometimes the feeling of being abandoned, of being punished in some other way, and we may not even be being abandoned or punished, but again, since we've got this little immature brain and we misconnect these dots, but it probably was modeled for you like it was for me. It's like, no matter what, you have to be nice, don't offend anybody, et cetera, et cetera. So let this be the way you move away from this. Let this be, if Bill says something and you find yourself in distress, rather than like he doesn't want you to trigger him, it would be wise not to be in that place where you're going to try to avoid his triggering you. Let yourself be triggered. And let's say a situation occurs where you have to say what's true for you. Like, let's say you have to say, I'm not really crazy about that couple that you wanted us to go out with, and when I just kind of check into my intuition, it feels pretty flat, and I don't really want to do that. You can, but I don't want to do that. And you might have to pace the floor for 10 minutes, and you might have butterflies in your stomach, and you might be nervous, but little by little, you have to take what seems like a literal, from a little girl's point of view, survival level risk to say, no, I can't do that, or this doesn't work for me. But you are in the kindest situation. In other words, it's like you're in a little petri dish here. And Bill is not going to be, an abusive, horrible person. He may ask you something, and this is going to be your opportunity to have your voice. Now, notice, I'm not saying you get to stand up to him, because that would imply that he's trying to hurt you, which he isn't. But it does give you a safe place to practice saying no when you mean no, and yes when you mean yes. And I know it's scary. I also know when you do that and you go, okay, that worked out, that was okay, and then you do it again and you do it again, and you will gradually unlearn all of that very early programming and replace it with, you can be kind and polite when you say what works for you and what doesn't. In other words, just don't have to be belligerent about it. But you find yourself free from that awful old limiting programming. And the only way you can get free of it is, as that old phrase goes, face the fear and do it anyway. What do you think?
Well, I know that when I have done it in the past, it's a reinforcement in a good way. I just am so hyper aware of that fear sometimes that I feel like my throat is closing if I'm going to say something that's going to anger him.
I hear you. Or to just sort of stand up for yourself. And again, by standing up for yourself, I'm not saying standing up against him. I'm just saying being your own best cheerleader, because you can see how you are your own enemy here. In other words, it's your old programming that's the enemy. Because if the programming weren't there, and Bill said, I'd like to do thus and so, or I want to move this chair over here, or whatever, and if that didn't work for you, you would go, I'd rather not do that, and here's the reason why. And it could be a perfectly
And kind of like, let's find a way that works for both of us. In other words, you would be in your rational mind, you would still be behaving like an adult. But we don't behave like adults when we start being wounded. We are thrown back into the back part of our brain. The front part turns off. So we're now way back in the fight or flight stress response place, and then it's just downhill from there. And so there's this learning to communicate with one another is so important. And you will see in important relationships like this, the ones that, drive you the craziest are the ones where it's a perfect match. In other words, what one person triggers the other person's most needed issue to be dealt with, and vice versa. So a first thing to do, let's say, and let's just practice this right now. I guess, obviously, since you're talking on the same phone, you must be fairly close to one another.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So in any event, here's what I want you to remember when one of you, like what you're saying right now, Eileen, about I just feel so scared of what might happen or what might be done where I'm going to have to stand up and be my own advocate. In other words, at this point, you have believed I don't have an advocate. And all I can do is to try to protect myself from people who are going to ask something of me that I find upsetting. Does that feel right?
Yes.
Okay, kind of like I don't have an advocate. So now you must become your own advocate. So let's pretend like, let's not pretend like at all. Is there something like right immediately now, not what might happen next week, but is there something immediately now that you want to say to Bill but have been afraid to do? Is there some issue that's kind of percolating in your mind that is where you feel annoyed or you feel scared that you have been afraid to say anything about it that you can think of? If not, we'll make up something. Or maybe Bill has something.
Right.
But I want to do this with you because I want you to have the chance to practice being your own advocate.
I feel like I have a big family that I'm very close to, and I feel like I have to make a choice between him and my family sometimes. And when we had this 6 weeks of living together, it obviously brought that issue to a head. It was over the holidays. And I just have such a hard time. I feel like I'm backed into a corner that I really can't tell him how important he is to me, and that I miss him when he doesn't want to share the time with my family with me.
Okay, well then let's look at a couple of things. I can hear that this is an issue for you, and we want it to not have to be an either or, so that you have to choose between your family or Bill. I don't know why at this point you feel that you need to do that, but let's just do one thing at a time. So what I want you to do is look at Bill right now, and I want you to tell him, rather than say, do this or don't do this, which is that attempt to try to control, and really trying to control another person is trying to control our own emotional state, like don't trigger me, so to speak. So just look at him and tell him right now that all I want you to do now, Bill, is I just want to be able to say how I feel. I don't want anything from you right now. I don't want any changes. All I want now is to feel like if I say something to you, I'm listened to. So all I want you to do now is listen.
Are you with me?
Yes.
Do you ever do that?
Well, when I've done it, it's been when I'm already in the wrong half of the brain.
Yeah. Right. Well, so right now, it's like this needs to be practiced because we are so habituated to saying, instead of saying, this is how I feel, we start with that you, which is a very finger-pointing kind of word in this case. And something like, you did this and you did that and you made me feel this way and so on and so forth, and I am so upset with you and whatnot. Well, the minute you start to accuse one another, then you might actually as well stop talking, because now all communication has been halted. Now everybody immediately is back in the back part of the brain being defensive. It's either attack, defense. So once you start saying you did this or you did that or you won't let me do this or you ruined my life or something like that, then don't count on one shred of communication occurring. You might as well get up and leave. However, if you say, like right now, if you just said to Bill, I feel really scared and I feel really upset. And even if you didn't say any more than that, Bill, when she says that to you, she's just telling you how she feels. She's not making you responsible. She's just saying, this is what's coming up for me. Do you feel like you need to cut and run?
I feel like it's a subtle way of saying I'm upset and you are responsible. I kind of take it like that, I think.
Okay, well, I'd like for you to then say, I think I'm adding the last part. In other words, you can see that is self-sabotage on your part. Because if all she's doing is saying, I'm scared, I don't know how to handle things, I'm upset, she hasn't said a word about, and it's your fault. But you notice how your ego mind has added that into the content.
Right. Well, that's true. But like Eileen said a minute ago, usually the only time we've ever done that, or Eileen has attempted to do that, is when we are already in a big disagreement or conflicted place. So and then she might say, well, I feel hurt or scared or angry, and I feel like since I'm the one she's interacting with at this time, I'm causing this stuff. And I feel like that's what she's trying to say to me. In other words,
well, then let's just sort of take a second look at that, because if she's earnestly and genuinely trying to communicate to you simply how she feels, and Eileen, you might even say, I realize I'm doing this to myself because, after all, that's the way brain chemistry works. Only my thoughts create my emotional state. It's not even physically possible for anybody else to get inside my brain and do that. So anytime anybody is saying this is how I feel, the actual fact is, if you were going to add a statement, is, and I am causing this because no one else can. We don't usually say that, but that's the actual fact. But you see, you can notice that your ego mind that feels punished already. In other words, your ego mind that says you are an unworthy, stupid person, and all that stuff that you've learned, jumps right in there and tries to sabotage this beginning to do communicating a different way. Can you see how it wants to do that? So right now, just take what she says at face value, that she's just saying, I'm really upset. And you heard her say a little while ago, I just feel like I can never stand up for myself and say what's really going on with me. And which, of course, just makes us feel like we're living in some kind of a tiny little prison. So if you withdraw the assumption that you've thrown in there that this is some sort of an oblique way to blame you,
then you could see how much you're blaming yourself, that you're automatically going to presume that that's her motivation.
Right. Right.
So what if you didn't do that?
Well, it would be different, I'm sure. I think for our own practically practicing this, we would need to do this at a time when we're not in conflict already. I think that's a big step to do before we're both kind of out of our right mind and into the wrong mind, so to speak.
Well, that certainly makes sense, that you can kind of just practice saying things that you normally don't say about how you feel when it's less volatile than perhaps about the family or whatever it is that's the most heated or that has the potential for the most heated distress. But the thing that I want both of you to see is that if you make I statements like, this is the way I feel right now, and really all I want you to do is listen because I'm kind of afraid to say this anyway, then if you would in fact just listen and not give any advice and not add your own sense of being attacked to it, that you just hear a fellow human being saying, I hurt. Just kind of tune into what response comes up for you if a fellow human being is just saying, I hurt right now.
Well, I would want to help them not hurt.
Very good. In other words, you could see that if you choose to hear her comment as not secretly loaded with barbs in some way, in other words, she's just saying, I feel upset, then you have the option to stay open and just listen. Just
right.
And Eileen, as he sits there and says, I really hear that you feel very sad, or whatever the feeling may be. See, this is not getting in, there's no finger pointing, there's you did this and I did that, and this is what happens, because it's never about the events or the facts. It's always about the feelings that are evoked that causes us such pain. It's never about, I'm really upset because you didn't take out the trash. It's like, it's not about the trash. It would be, I'm really upset because I feel like nobody pays any attention to me. See, it's never about the events. It's about what we decide the events mean. Like, if you don't take out the trash, it means you don't care about me. There's nothing inherent in that about the trash, but you see how we add stuff to what goes on, and we make up all sorts of stories. So, Eileen, if he was just with you there and said, I'm really sorry that you feel a lot of pain right now. I'm right here listening. What happens for you?
I trust him.
Okay. And then you go, oh, all I want to do is just hold your hand. I just want to know that we can just be here together and that I now can have this tiny little practice of just being able to say how I feel and not go any further than that. I just need to unburden myself because I so rarely do it and I don't know how to do it. And I need your help. And so as you convey that, do you feel like you could be safe to do that?
Yeah.
And so tell me right now, just hold his hand and tell me how you feel now.
Safe and hopeful.
Okay. And you see, you were the one who put yourself in a situation to feel safe and hopeful. In other words, when you just are expressing what's going on with you and not blaming the other person, you're not saying
you're the guilty party, because everybody already feels guilty. In other words, Bill already feels like he's not a good person and he's unworthy. So if somebody comes along and basically says, you're right, you're a crummy person, you're guilty, and that's the end of that, well, what's he going to do but become more angry, more defensive, more unavailable, more sad, more everything else, and any hope of communication is totally lost. But if you do not add to his sense of guilt, where you just say, I just want you to be my friend, and I just want to practice saying what's going on with me. I don't even know how to do this very well. And so I just want to practice. And you can see how there's a kindness that can develop between you. And of course, this works both ways. Bill, you get to say the same thing, you know, where there's no you in sight. This is what I'm realizing, or this is how I'm feeling right now. And I just want to practice hearing myself say how I feel and get a handle on these things that I realize I believe about myself. And I am attacking myself mercilessly with these beliefs. So what would that be like? Does that feel easier?
That would be freeing. I am in my life. It's only been a handful of years where I've actually started to be able to feel right. I've suppressed my feeling since I was a baby, probably. But as far as I can remember,
most of us do. That's the problem. We're just kind of walking around like zombies because everybody has been taught one way or the other to be afraid of how we feel. So look at this impossible situation. Unwittingly, the things that I believe about myself are causing my emotional states. I mean, quite literally, how it works from a biology point of view is if I learn when I'm very little that I'm no good or that I'm stupid and nobody cares about me or I'm not going to be included or something like that, those are thoughts of not being safe. Fair to say?
Exactly.
All right. So once we think those thoughts, we basically tell the brain, listen, I'm not safe. And it says, okay. And it springs into action. And it activates the stress response. It activates the fight or flight response because it doesn't have a little chat with you and say, Bill, are you really in danger or are you just making this up? If you tell it, I'm in danger, and that's what you are telling it when you feel like nobody cares about you, because what could be more dangerous to a young person than nobody caring about you when you're too little to care for yourself? So it starts dumping those stress hormones into the body and messing up the body chemistry. And all those chemicals flood the body and are taken up inside the cells via receptor sites. And it's that chemical cocktail in the body created by your thought processes that causes you to feel the way you feel in the first place. So you can see this is an internal closed loop that has nothing to do with anybody else. It's entirely with how I interpret things and what I tell my brain. Now, all of us obviously misinstruct the brain because we have misconnected the dots of our experience in many cases. But in any event, you can begin to see that upset feeling and the belief of not being okay and being unworthy and being unimportant and needing to be dismissed is this terrible closed loop. In other words, you feel terrible and then you believe more and more of those things about yourself, and then you feel more terrible and believe more terrible things. And the only way to stop that closed loop is to interrupt it. And relationships can be the big interrupter if you understand how they work. If you understand that Eileen's saying, don't put the coffee pot there, gives you a chance to, okay, I can be in touch with how I feel. Now, instead of just continuing in my normal closed loop of being upset with her and you and everybody else, you can go, okay, well, I realize some stuff has come up, so now what I'm going to do is detour over here, and I'm going to just give myself permission to feel exactly how I feel. That's my job right now. In other words, whatever it is that has caused the way I feel has now become irrelevant. Lesson number 5 in the course, it says, I am never upset for the reason I think. So you are never upset because Eileen says X, Y, or Z. The upset is because you believe you're not okay, and something that she has said just triggers your awareness of something that you already believe.
That's right. Yes, I fully, when I do that, when I practice that I am never upset, it really works. It amazes me how I can forget to do that sometimes.
Well, this is what I want you to remember at every moment, that there's not an accident about your all's coming together, nor is there an accident about what you're being pushed to do. In other words, both of you are being pushed, literally, to go in there and take a look at and to see and articulate these things you recognize that you believe about yourself and what you can and can't do, and the things that and the pain that brings up for you. In other words, this requires some self-reflection, some self-discovery, ultimately, therefore, some self-healing. Not self-medication, but some self-healing. And then your relationships and the rest of your life can get better and better and better and better. So we're not doing this because it's some sort of a morally upright thing to do. This is to bring you to a place of peace and happiness, which you cannot possibly experience while you're busy believing you're no good. It's just impossible.
That's true. You know, I find this fascinating. You know, I agree with you.
Well, I find it fascinating too, and I find it probably a little more fascinating because I've been at this longer and done it longer and let go of more stuff by this time. I found it, well, in the beginning I didn't understand it. Nobody was there to tell me anything. I had to kind of slog through it by myself, and discover things. And so that's why I feel very passionate now about if people only had the right information and they could see that this is not about the reality of a person. We're only undoing false beliefs about ourselves. We're not undoing ourselves. We're just undoing old, damaged, untrue, inaccurate, unhelpful. It's kind of flatter thinking. You know, the earth is not flat. We need a higher perspective. We are not bad. We just need a broader perspective, and this is how you get to it. Relationships are always the fast track to finding out what's going on with us because we're so skilled at denying.
Right.
And our relationships sometimes shake us up in a way that all of your best defenses just finally don't work. And you go, I hate this. And you might say love says, oh, thank goodness, now we can get some healing done here.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I hope that's helpful as you move in together tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, my solution, I was just thinking as we're talking, is I thought the solution might be to just buy a bigger house and have you come move in and live with us so you could remind us of all this stuff all the time.
I've had a few other invitations along the line.
I'm not the only one that thought that.
No. So, in any event. But you see, if you realize everybody's got everything they need, it's just being open because we are habituated to being closed and everybody loses and nobody gains. And if you realize, I'm going to be open. I'm going to be open to whatever this energy frequency is coming from my partner that's getting behind all of my very tight defenses and hitting that wound anyway. And it's like, okay, time for me to allow this wound to be healed. And then the amazing thing is the very same thing could happen at some point later on, and you won't be troubled by it at all. And you'll think, that is amazing. This used to drive me crazy. Now it doesn't, because you're letting go of your guilt. You're letting go of your fear. Fewer and fewer things trigger you. And all along, you just keep learning. You don't ever stop learning, but it gets to be easier, faster. You're more aware of what's going on and more capable of handling it in really an adult way. So that's all really good news.
It's so exciting to consider the truth that there really is a better way to live.
Always, and it's always it's kind of like the better way hovers around us all the time. Like, are you ready to change your mind yet? Are you ready to change your mind yet? We're all here to help you whenever you are. So you go, okay, today is the first day of the rest of my life, and so today is the day. Yes, I am now going to be my own best advocate. So, Bill, it's your job to say, you know what, I'm really a very sweet, kind, wonderful man, and I deserve nothing but to have a wonderful relationship and to be able to express who I really am. So that's your job to keep thinking about this. And there's something I'm going to put in one of the Course in Miracles lessons that I'm doing daily now, because I just remembered it the other day, is that if you notice that sometimes a Course lesson will say, repeat this with your eyes open, and then repeat it a few more times with your eyes closed. Do you know if you do that, it takes about 15 seconds to do that. And then our neuroscientist friends will say, when you want to put a new idea to get the little synapses rewired in your brain, you need to think a thought about 15 seconds, or to be in a place of gratitude about 15 seconds. In other words, stay with the upgraded thought for 15 seconds at least, so that it can get rewired in your brain. Pretty interesting, don't you think?
That's excellent. That's a good reminder. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, take very good care of yourselves, and I'll hope to see you again, talk to you again one of these days.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you so much.
You're surely welcome, dears. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, who among us doesn't need a little reminder about what our relationships are for, to hasten that healing, since behaviors in others reveal and not cause what we believe, and thus what upset we're causing ourselves. Note the causing ourselves part. It is just such a shame that we are so rarely taught this in our early formative years and have to find this out the hard way. Our lovely callers are taking those scary but necessary first steps in challenging their old programming in order to live a much happier and freer life. I surely do wish them every blessing. And I so hope you'll try asking your partner to simply listen when you express how you feel and refrain from that wrong-making word you, as in, this is your fault. You'll be surprised how much easier things will be when two people actually listen to each other. I surely am looking forward to being together next month. And until then, best wishes from all of us. Bye.